So I'm excited to be here with Paul from Northern Bicycle because one of the questions that I get a lot on social media and just talking to people is, can I ride my e-bike in the winter? What if I ruin it? What do I have to do to keep it clean? Mm-hmm. So I was really excited when you said that you could meet with us and talk a little bit about how to do the maintenance, the daily, the weekly, mm-hmm. and seasonal. So if you want to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we hear that too. It's kind of makes sense to be a question in Winnipeg because we get winter, 10 months of the year, it seems, some years. So people wanting to use their bikes, and especially e-bikes, because we've been told, don't get electronics wet. And But the good thing is with e-bikes, we don't have to worry about that. At least with reputable companies like the ones we carry in shop or Rad Power such as you have, a lot of them put the time in to consider how to make the connectors waterproof and the batteries and so forth are well connected. So we don't have to worry about that part.
Awesome. And you guys do specialize in e-bikes as well, right?
Yeah, we consider ourselves to be Winnipeg's e-bike specialists. Awesome. Our mechanic here has worked on e-bikes for 18 plus years.
Oh, wow.
I've been into them for a bunch of years too, so
cool.
We have the experience and have been figuring out which brands are the best and most reputable and handle our climate.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to let you take it away and show me sort of what I should be doing here.
So kind of the big thing is when you're out riding, it's surprising even when we have these -30, -40 days that much like how your bike is starting to drip, bikes will drip off.
Right.
And we all know what water causes rust, partly because of the salt on the roads and the dirt. So one of the first things you should do, summer, winter, but winter more so, is making sure your chain is clean and you're using a lube that's appropriate to it.
Okay.
So first off, a product that we use quite often, especially for our rental fleet for fat bikes, after we've cleaned off a drivetrain, which is simply like take a rag, wipe your chain off.
Okay.
And I know, we have a fancy stand here. People at home may not, so sit on your floor in your kitchen or your living room and do the same thing. But we just like to give chain a good dryness. And then a product that we use quite often in this store is by a company called Muck Off. The reason we use Muck Off is they're environmentally friendly. They're one of the few companies that actively work to reduce packaging. All their product is biodegradable, so it's not a petroleum product that will then seep into the ground and cause environmental issues. This particular one, MO94, some people know of WD-40. This is like WD-40 for bikes.
Okay.
So the idea is after you've wiped your drivetrain off, is spraying this on somewhat generously, because it will actually push the water out of your chain. It will dry the water out of all your pulleys and so forth, or you'll get water build up into all the derailleur pivots. Okay. So that's why we really like this guy. With our rental bikes, as I said, we use this as soon as they come back in, and we don't see any rust build up.
Okay. And so do you have to be careful with anything in here?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see how that works.
So definitely with stuff like this, aerosols and stuff, you don't want to be spraying toward your brake. Okay. Because the moment you get anything build up on your brake,
it won't work.
All of a sudden you start sounding like you're calling a fleet of dolphins. So it gets a little loud. But most of it's just giving it a good spray off, getting into all your derailleur points. Typically, we would leave this to sit for a bit. Okay. Like 10, 15 minutes, because then that gives the product enough time to start to dissipate the water out of these areas.
Oh, okay.
And then after that time has passed, then wipe things off.
So wipe, then spray, then wipe again.
Yeah, wipe your chain off. Other parts you don't necessarily need to wipe off ahead of time, but the number one thing with the bike is a clean bike is a happy bike. Okay. Because all that grime and stuff gets into all the moving parts, and over time that will wear them out.
So would you do the spray every day, or just wipe every day and then the spray once in a while?
Let's be realistic. Most people don't have the time or aren't going to think about it. Our lives are busy, so you're not going to. Okay. In an ideal world, absolutely. Okay. But I would say at least a couple times a week. Because this also, I mean, it's not a true bike chain lubricant, but there is lubricant in it as well. So that will get into the parts and at least create some kind of lubrication. Because often in winter, what we see the most, especially on chains, is rust.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you get enough rust, and that chain is not going to move as nice and freely as yours does.
Okay.
Which then means your ride's going to suck.
Okay.
The other fun part we all know in Winnipeg, since we're dealing with chains, is temperature.
Right.
And you've ridden in some pretty seriously cold temperatures trying things out. I mean, seen you with the pogies, and I watched your setup video, so I know you're ready to endure.
Right.
For your bike though, there are, again, like we like to use the Muck Off. There are other brands out there. Like there's kind of your regular wet lube that you would use in summertime or spring, dry lube when it's really dry. But in winter, Muck Off has actually developed bike lube that will work for -50.
Wow, okay.
Because one of the neat things is a lot of the petroleum-based products at about -25, they start to get gummy and break down and don't work as well. That's why with older bikes, we'll actually overhaul the hubs and the bearing surfaces and replace petroleum grease with lithium grease, because that freezes at -100.
Oh, okay.
Because when your bearings start freezing up, then you're working that much harder. And that's why -50 chain lube, because it makes your chain run a lot looser. It doesn't get gummed up in the colder temperatures, which...
So at which point should we switch to that? -20, -15?
-20 is kind of that good cutoff point.
Okay.
Before that, I mean, why not? If you're not somebody that wants to carry and have sitting around your house 3-4 different lubes, pick one. In Winnipeg, we do know we have a lot of cold, so even in the summertime, this isn't gonna be bad.
So you can use it year round.
Yeah, you could. It's the formula is specific to Winnipeg, winters, or well, cold climate in general.
And you sell these on your website as well, right? Okay, perfect.
And then chain lube wise, we'll actually use a different one. Actually, no, we'll use that. Chain lube wise, it's just a matter of making sure you get lube on all the rollers. One little trick I know is approximately when you turn the cranks around 4 times, that usually covers the full chain. Okay. So you're not having to like,
4 times.
Oh, did I get lube all over? Squeeze on the chain. And then that usually gets you a good amount of lube on there. Again, like with the other product, let it sit for a few minutes just because that lets the lube drip into the chain. Quite often we'll see people put the lube on and then immediately wipe it off. The problem is the lubricant's going nowheres. So all the work we did repelling the water,
gone.
Exactly.
Hi there, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe. Thank you. So the other thing that I did the other day when we got back from our ride, and it was one of those days where the snow was just stuck to the bike. So we let it sit for a bit, and then I used a jug of warm water with dish soap just to get the snow away from, you know, all of the, especially this being a folding bike. I wanted to open it up and rinse everything because there was a lot of sand in there as well. Is that something that's okay to do?
Oh, yeah. Or, that's really smart to do because you've seen while you ride up and down the street the amount of sand. And yeah, that just works into all the surfaces and stuff. So like I said, while I was doing this, a clean bike is a happy bike.
Yeah.
It also lets you inspect the bike. So as you're cleaning it through, it's letting you see maybe there's some new scrapes or something in the paint, or it lets you observe things like all of a sudden, maybe if you haven't paid attention to this for a while, and then you're like, oh, this is a little hard to open now.
Yeah.
But by taking that time, even once a week to wipe it off and clean it, then it gives you that peace of mind.
Prolonging the life of the bike as well.
And that's the big thing. Like your bike should last you a very long time, but it'll only do so if you put the proper maintenance in. If you take that time to love and care for your bike, it's no different than with a vehicle. You go get a regular oil change, or you do different service intervals. It's the same thing with your bike.
Right. So we'll talk about that in a second too, but is there anything specific about the battery we should be careful with? This area here where it connects to the bike and to the electrical?
I wouldn't be pouring a lot of water onto it. but the connectors are generally, for most brands, fairly tight, fairly repellent of water.
Okay.
And that's where, with a lot of the casing and stuff, but it's a good idea to be gentle about that.
Okay.
The other is with e-bike in winter, and you may have experienced this, that your battery will last a bit, not as long as it will in the summer. Just the cold temperatures reduce the capacity and will make the battery push out faster because it's trying to keep itself warm.
Yes, I noticed in the beginning when I first got the bike, and I was riding in -20, and I could get, probably 3 rides to work and back, about 40 kilometers, and then it had to get charged. Whereas now I can go a little bit longer because it's a little nicer out. So
yeah, and that's just one of the e-bike things.
Well, any battery, right?
Exactly.
Same with your phone. Yeah, exactly. So now talking about like a maintenance schedule, how often do you see people bringing their bikes in to get a tune-up? Do you see it happening beginning of spring, beginning of fall?
Spring is always the mad rush in a bike shop. This is why we spend years trying to tell people, bring your bike in the winter.
Yeah.
Because usually the mechanics were a little quieter, we're happier to do things. There's less bikes in for repair, so you're going to get a faster return.
Right.
Typically right now we're pushing 24-hour turnaround.
Nice.
Whereas you get into the busyness of spring, when everybody's thinking about the warm weather, could be a week or 2 weeks without your bike.
But even if you're riding in the winter, you would still bring it in for a tune-up sort of in the middle of winter? And
sure.
Yeah.
It'd be a good idea. A lot of it depends on distance.
Right.
Kind of the idea, like, it's 5,000 kilometers between oil changes on a car.
Right.
On a bike, I mean, one of the key wear things, or the primary thing that you wear, is usually your chain.
Right.
And your chain will last you, ballpark, if you're doing the maintenance of keeping it clean and lubricating it, you'll get about 1,500 kilometers out of a chain.
Okay.
That's usually a great indicator as to where the rest of the bike is at, as far as if the gearing is worn out a bit and that sort of thing. But usually that 1,500 kilometers is about the life of a chain.
Okay.
So for some people, that could be 2 or 3 years of riding. For some people, like we had a lady, she bought an e-bike in June, just had her bike here a couple weeks ago to get fixed, and had 2,500 kilometers on. Because she's like you, she rides to work both ways, a good distance, and before you know it.
Yeah,
so,
you're up there.
Or the other way we look at it is we kind of ballpark our repair packages around time. So like we have like a 50 interval, 50 hours, or then we have 100 hour. For a lot of people, usually that 100 hours is what they'll hit in a year tops. For you and I that ride most of the year, I mean, that is half of a month, maybe. Yeah. Depends on distance.
Right.
But yeah, it's important to do those regular intervals to kind of, especially with the e-bike, it's handy because you've got the controller display that can tell you how many kilometers have you actually gone. It's one of the things I love with the e-bike, because a lot of people are like, I don't know, on a non-e-bike how far I've gone, but with the e-bike, look at the odometer. It's like, oh, you went that distance. Great.
Right. And if you don't, your Apple Watch, if you're keeping track of your workouts. And,
like I use on my main mountain bike, I use Strava as an app to keep track of my workouts. And so I can look at it and be like, oh, I've got this distance on.
Right. Perfect. That's great.
But yeah, so kind of your main things are keep your bike clean regularly, and then paying attention to little things like that, like what's your distance and is your chain worn out? Because once that chain starts wearing out, then it will take other components with it, and that repair bill starts to go up and up. Okay.
Anything about the motor that we need to kind of keep an eye on or listen for, or
generally no. The motors are super robust. Because they're kind of the brain, they're what does everything for you in the e-bike. They're super well sealed. We very, very rarely ever see a motor have an issue.
Okay.
So that kind of part you don't have to worry too much about. As far as water and stuff, well, we know riding around, there's puddles and stuff, and it's like constantly getting wet. They're built to endure that.
Okay, that's awesome.
Maybe don't go riding into a lake with it. But...
No, I won't do that. Thank you so much. How can we find out more about the shop?
The best way is come down and visit us at 1841 Portage Avenue,
Okay.
or jump on our website, northernbicycle.ca. On there, we list a bunch of information about e-bikes. We have some really great blog posts about them as well.
Great. I think you have a newsletter as well, right? That people can sign up for.
Exactly.
Right? And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Like and subscribe so we can keep doing stuff like this. And I really look forward to maybe meeting with you again and doing some other stuff over the
Absolutely,
summer.
we can.
Great. Thank you so much.